How's it going? My name is Mohring. I'm out here playing drums with Jagwar Twin, promoting his album cycle of 33, which is out now everywhere. We've been having some awesome shows thus far. It's been a great time, great set to play. We're having an absolute blast. Great team, so yeah, we're really enjoying ourselves out here. We got a bunch of stuff back here that we're working on to make this show happen. First and foremost, starting with the shells of the actual kit. This is a kit that we just have for this tour that we're sharing with the other band on the tour. It's a DW, I believe, Collector's series. Yep, Collector's. We got 12, 16, 22 by 18, I believe. I'm typically playing Gretsch myself, Gretsch and Ludwig, depending on the situation, but we're rocking this one for this tour, and it's been sounding great. So I'm typically rocking a one up, one down situation for the most part. Varies a little bit, but usually I'm doing 12 rack, 16 floor tom, and then usually a 22, either 22-14 or 22-18 kick. That's most common for me, and then I'll assemble around it kind of based on the situation, based on the style. Yeah, that usually ends up being what I'm doing for the most part for pretty much any kind of pop, indie, rock, that kind of thing. Snare, this is my baby. I love this thing so much. It's pretty iconic. It is a 8 by 14 Ludwig Black Beauty. It's, I think, arguably the most recorded snare. I don't know about the 8-inch depth specifically, but I think the Black Beauty in general is regarded as the most recorded snare. Someone on the internet is probably going to correct me on that, but I absolutely love it. I got it at the Pro Drum Shop in Hollywood. I wasn't necessarily planning on buying a snare that day, but I was tapping around and this thing just sung like no other. And so I pretty much this is my primary snare on almost exclusively everything I do, including studio, tours. It tunes down really well for like a low gushy sound. You can crank it way up for like a super pop, cracky gospel sound. I love this thing so much. Let's see, the head on the snare is a Remo Power Stroke. I'll usually do that on this snare specifically. I'll usually go for coated vintage Emperor from Remo for toms. And then the kick, I'll usually go for the Aquarian Super Kick that has the big foam rim. I think that just adds a really nice tone to it. Generally, with the exception of that Super Kick, generally sitting with Remo primarily. On the snare here is a Roland RT30 trigger. It's a snare trigger that's connected up to the SPD here via the trigger input. We're using a little bit of a hybrid situation on this tour, so a lot of samples from the songs are on the SPD for various tracks, and then a handful of snare samples specifically are also on the SPD, but then triggered by the trigger here. And so that's all routed through the SPD here. We have just a left-right out, which is actually a dual mono in this situation. It's just like kicks and low and high, kick and snare, separate mono. Those are panned hard left and right. I have, going into the back of here, I have just a MIDI input for patch changes on this, which connects up to our playback rig, which I'll talk about in just a little bit. So as playback is running, the patches on the SPD are changing automatically for me so that I don't have to change manually, because I will almost certainly forget to do that. Cymbals, these are also my absolute favorites. Istanbul Agop, primarily the traditional line. We got a couple different things going on here. 14-inch jazz hats for hi-hats, which are, I'm really not a jazz drummer. I'm primarily, rock, pop, that kind of thing, but these jazz hats are perfect for me. I bash on them pretty hard, and I still love them. 20-inch medium crash on the left side here. All these are, Istanbul Agop traditional. Got a 22 original ride as the ride over here. It's a pretty, it's it's a pretty washy ride. I definitely put it in the category of like a crash ride. I feel like a lot of other companies would probably call this a crash just based on how much wash you get from it, but I kind of like that more buttery ride feel. And then lastly over here is a 22 traditional dark crash, which is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. Very washy, very dark. But these AGOPs in general, I feel like, in my opinion, are the most musical, versatile cymbals that I've found, and I've really connected to the sound of them overall. This over here is a stack with, I'm actually blanking on what's on the bottom right now, but it's a 16-inch Istanbul Exist Ion, kind of an effects crash with a little big fat snare drum ching ring sitting on it that kind of has a clap tambourine sort of effect going on. These are also my favorite. Vader Sugar Maple Power 5B. Absolutely love these. I love the length and the width of the Power 5B, but for me personally, the normal Hickory Power 5B is too heavy. So this is made from maple instead, and it ends up being physically a lot lighter than the Hickory version, but with the same exact shape and dimensions. So I really like these ones myself. This right here is one of a few different models from the company Porter and Davies that does, it's like tactile kick drum monitoring via your throne. And so this unit right here actually is basically like a tube amp, similar to just like a guitar amp, that has a speaker con output into this drum throne, which, I don't know what's on the bottom here, itself has a tactile speaker unit in it. It's basically like a big ring of metal that actually responds to the speaker output that you're getting from this amp. And where that's getting input from is actually a third kick-in mic that we have in the kick drum here. So when I hit the kick drum, I'm actually feeling a very accurate version of that audio signal up through the throne, which I think a lot of drummers are starting to really like. I know these things are starting to get a lot more popular, and I think it helps a lot for situations where you are on in-ear monitors and we have no wedges or stage monitoring, and especially for drums, a lot of times you'll have a pretty big drum sub that you'll get bass and kick out of, and I know a lot of drummers such as myself like having the physical feeling of the kick hitting them in situations where we have a so-called silent stage. You don't get that, and so this helps quite a bit to get both the kick, and then it also kind of naturally ends up picking up a little bit of the subs from the room as well. So I kind of get a little bit of that like bass feeling that you would normally get from a sub wedge just through the throne here. And so that's Porter and Davies. This is the BCX specifically, which is it's their smallest model, but also their most portable. So it actually kind of fits the throne and the amp and everything all fits into basically a case that resembles like a rack tom case. And they have some bigger ones that have a little more power, but are also a little less portable. But these things are sick. Playback here, this is a whole other thing. This is what I would consider to be a pretty standard, flyable pop playback rig. We're using the iConnectivity Play Audio 12 for the primary audio playback. In this case, we're rocking 10 channels of output. It's 4 stereo pairs for music, and then 2 separate clicks, one that's going to the vocalist and one that's going to the 2 band members. And those have some different clicks and slates and guides and that kind of thing in them. Right underneath that and linked to it via a network switch is the iConnectivity Mio XM, which we have doing some MIDI, sending some MIDI information around stage. Nothing too crazy on this tour. There's definitely examples of much more complicated MIDI networks that people set up with these things, but in this case it's just my patch changes here on the SPD, and then some tempo sync information on the guitar player's helix. There's a couple of like sidechain pulse effects that we have synced to the tempo of the track, among a couple other things, delay throws, that kind of thing. so he gets that tempo information automatically. Let's see, within the session here itself, we are, of course, using Ableton Live to run this show. The show is set up in Ableton's arrangement view accordingly, with every song has its own playhead like this, and the various outputs are routed accordingly. We're controlling the show with Strange Electronics Setlist plugin, which basically is it's a Max for Live device that organizes all the playheads into a very simple interface like this, where you have just every song and a play stop up down, and you can rearrange different set lists based on the show or the tour that you're doing. And then controlling that interface there is right here, the Oak Tone. I think this specific one is called the Oak Board Mini. I could be wrong, but there's maybe three versions of these MIDI controllers that Oak Tone makes, and they're playback specific. So it's a very simple device. It's a MIDI controller with 6 buttons, but it's set up specifically to operate with something like this, where you just have previous, next. I have this map to just open and close that interface there, and then play and stop for the playback. And then I guess this is also, we have our vocals passing through a Universal Audio Twin down there for some vocal processing. And then the back is all set up with a back panel, so the outputs and everything are kind of pretty clean, like you would get with a front of house unit. Thanks so much to Gearmasters for coming by the Jagwar Twin tour today. You can come check us out. We got another month left of the tour around the U.S. So there's a bunch of shows, probably one coming to your city. And definitely check out the album 33, which is out now everywhere. And we're having an absolute blast playing it live every night. So thanks so much.